Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We're the interpreters. Just a few notes on it. We're part of the MARB Language Service team, and we're all very committed to language justice, make sure that everyone gets to participate in the language of choice. We have interpretation headsets in the back. There'll be different channels for Creole and Spanish. And also we have the sign language interpreter available. And there are just a few things for some people who speak very fast. Please make sure that that you're taking breaths. If you take breaths, we'll be fine. And if we can't hear you, so these are some of the signs you might see from us or find from us if we need you to raise your volume. Buenas tardes a todo el mundo. Quiero agradecer por estar aquí con nosotros. Somos aquí el equipo de MARB Language Services, aquí los servicios ofreciendo servicios de justicia de idioma que todo el mundo pueda participar en el idioma que desea. Además de que hay traducción por medio de los equipos de traducción aquí, hay por teléfono. We have a telephone line. So for Creole, the telephone line will be 305-901-2692. And for Spanish, the telephone number is 786-665-8802. Tenemos una línea de traducción. En español va a ser 786-665-8802. Thank you.
Bonsoir, non, moi c'est Luman. Je travaille pour MARB Interpretation Services. Nous là pour nous capables de l'interprétation de façon que tout le monde qui là comprendre ce qu'a fait là, il participer dans la langue que vous êtes à l'aise là. Si nous besoin d'entendre ce qu'a fait là en créole, nous capables d'aller derrière, nous prendre petit appareil que vous besoin pour nous capables d'entendre en créole. Il y a quelques petits bagages que nous besoin que nous comprenions tout. Si nous parlons un petit peu trop vite, il était difficile pour nous capables de comprendre ça va dire, pour nous capables d'interpréter, j'ai noté de faire là. Nous avons fait un signe comme ça veut dire prendre ça en considération, parlons petit gens plus doucement. Si plusieurs nous ont parlé, il y a un petit gens difficile pour nous capables de traduire, nous avons fait un geste comme ça veut dire yon moun parler à la fois. Nous disons bonne participation. Il parlait de un téléphone qui gagne pour nous capables de en créole. What is the phone number for the Creole line? 305 901 2692. Merci en pile. Bonne participation.
Lastly, if you need a translation headset at any time, just raise your hand, they'll bring it to you. Si en cualquier momento necesitan el equipo de traducción, levantan la mano y se lo traemos. Thank you.
Si nous avons besoin d'interprétation, levez maintenant, n'a petit appareil là pour vous. Merci.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, Pat. Good evening. Welcome to the Pérez Art Museum. My name is Marie Vickles. I'm the Senior Director of Education, and I'd like to, again, thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure to host the 43rd Annual West Indian Literature Conference at the museum today, including this public program that we are set to enjoy in just a few moments. Welcome also to those that are watching us online. We're streaming right now live, so you can also share this program with the people that are not here with us in the room. They can follow our YouTube channel and watch the program live tonight. So tonight's presentation, From the Eye of the Storm, and today's conference sessions are hosted at the museum with the support of PAMM's Caribbean Cultural Institute initiative. The Caribbean Cultural Institute originally started with funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and was conceived as a curatorial and research platform dedicated to the promotion of scholarship and artistic production across the Caribbean and its diaspora. Through exhibitions, publications, programming, and collections development, we continue this work. Through this initiative, PAMM aims to provide a platform for cultural production from the greater Caribbean and its diaspora, and that includes Dutch, English, French, Spanish-speaking, Creole-speaking, Patois-speaking, all of the Caribbean. So just think about PAMM when you think about all these different aspects of how we can support your studies, maybe even your research on especially contemporary and modern art as it relates to the Caribbean. I'd like to shout out, we do have a library, a research library, which one of our artists and staff members oversees, Victoria Ravello. She's right there. Just if you have any questions or you want to learn more about what that research library provides, please feel free to reach out. You can chat with her or connect with us online. And of course, we do also have a CCI fellowship, so that's also something I'd be happy to tell you more about. A few acknowledgements before I pass the mic. First and foremost, I'd like to thank and acknowledge Dr. Pat Saunders for her partnership on this program. We're honored to host today's conference and to host all of you, writers, scholars, educators, and more that are gathered here in Miami from all over the world. Thank you for connecting us all here at PAMM, Dr. Saunders, and thank you for your vision, hard work, and so much more. Your dedication to this program and the 43rd edition of this conference has made it a very special experience, so let's give her a hand. Also, big thank yous to the PAMM team that you've seen running around the building all day today. Shout out and thanks to David Miller, Adult and Public Programs Manager, Natalie Fundora, our Education Coordinator, and of course, our world-class Senior Audio Visual Manager, Denise Faxis, for helping us with all things tech on every floor and probably space in the museum today. Thank you, Denise. We could not have done it without you. All right, without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Dr. Pat Saunders.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your evening to join us for what I anticipate will be a very enriching evening. I would like to first thank, again, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Miami, the Center for Global Black Studies, Modern Languages and Literatures at the University of Miami, and all of my colleagues who are here and offering all different kinds of support. I would also, of course, like to thank the Pérez Art Museum and their amazing team for hosting us throughout the course of the day. I think that this is part of our tradition. Every time we've held this conference, we've made a point of partnering with a Miami-based cultural institution. So this is our first time at the Pérez Art Museum. Thank you for making this possible. Thank you to Franklin Sermons and to the Mellon Foundation. I would also like to observe appropriate protocol for the afternoon, and I would like to welcome and invite to the microphone for a few words the Consular General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago here in Miami, Mr. Bruce Lai. Please come and say a few words.
Hello, good evening. Can everyone hear me? All right. I'll make it short and sweet and not delay the evening's proceedings. I'm happy to be here. As Pat would have mentioned, I'm the Consul General of Trinidad and Tobago based here at the consulate in Florida. When I first became aware of this activity on West Indian literature, I could not help myself but offer to Pat any support that I would be able to provide. As an alumni of the University of the West Indies, it's something that it would be remiss of me if there is an activity like this and I'm not involved in some way. I'm looking at the program in terms of what we're looking at this evening. There are a couple of quick things. There was the previous session we had with the poet Anthony Roberts when he made a comment in response to that question about memory, in terms of negotiating with a past version of yourself and trying to find your identity as an evolving thing. It's something that I've come to note a lot of in my very brief time in Florida. I only got here in January. And it's a recurring theme. I go back to my literature studies. It's almost like a motif that keeps coming up in terms of the situation that you find when there's a diaspora community here in Florida that would have come 20, 30, 40 years ago. And there's a cultural reference and framework that those persons from the diaspora would have from 20, 30, or 40 years ago. And I'm sure you may be familiar with the line about people being more English than the English. So we have Carnival this weekend, and there's a diaspora community that will think about Carnival how it was 30 years ago. And you go somewhere and you're hearing Tiny Whiny and send 5 cent, 10 cent dollar. And I remind myself, yes, classics. But when you use a word like classics, you also go into related words like vintage, and, right? And you go to these things and you think to yourself, at home, this would be marketed as a back-in-times fete. But here, it's just a fete, all right? But then you also get a demographic divide in that you go to that fete, and it's cent and 5 cent and 10 cent, and you look around, and everyone is like in their 50s. And you're thinking, where are all the teenagers and 20-something-year-olds? And they're in the Kess and Marshall fete that's happening 10 blocks down. So then you find yourself that there are different events, there are different carnivals, because there are different diasporas that you're treating with. I tell this story because in the same way that Anthony would have mentioned in terms of his work and you're negotiating with a past version of yourself, as a diaspora community, that's something that I see regularly as well. As a community, there's a constant negotiation. Sometimes it's progressive, sometimes it's not, right? Where there's that dynamic in terms of how the diaspora recollects a previous experience and frames that experience, right, in this situation that they find themselves here in a diaspora setting. And how do you then find a way, because that is relevant for the person who is trying to hold on to an experience from 30 years ago. And it is very familiar. And there's value in that it preserves culture. But then there's the other part that you have to engage in, which is transmitting culture to persons in the diaspora who would have been born here, who do not have that primary experience of Kess and a savanna grass and eating from granny pot and fighting over the sweetbread bowl after you mix the batter and you pour it and you say, all right, which one of us gets to lick the bowl clean, right? And there's a dynamic that happens in terms of there's an experience you want to hold on to and you want to preserve. But that experience still has to evolve in a way that it becomes relevant to the generations who were born here outside of that experience, in a way that they could find value in it, that they could hold on to it, and they could then transmit that on its own. So that gets into the negotiation and the evolution of these remembered things and how we hold on to these things and how we evolve with these things and how we transmit these things. We're looking now at a session on hurricane stories from the eye of the storm. And I would not want to get too literal, but very metaphorically, there are lots of storms around us that we are all very much conscious and aware of. And there are so many ways that we could take the theme of this session in terms of how, as Caribbean people, we treat with the storms that come upon us and how we manage ourselves and our responses to those storms that come upon us and how we come out of it safe on the other side. So I will stop at that point before people accuse me of hijacking the panel. I'm not one of the writers who we're going to be looking at this evening, so I will take my cue and say with these few words, thank you very much for your support for the activity this evening and for the duration of the conference. There's a great deal of value in us coming together and having these kinds of conversations and these kinds of engagements where we look back on these things that bind us together, these kinds of common and shared experiences, and we find the ways through which our responses to those experiences helps us move forward in dealing with the storms that are upon us and that will no doubt come upon us again. And I thank you with those few words. Good night.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I want to begin by, again, thanking everyone. And I remember when Kai and I came up with the idea for this afternoon's event, I said to Kai, boy, if we only goat mouth this conference, because we're in the middle of hurricane season. And the thought of having a hurricane stories event, I would like to say that Mother Nature has been kind to us, but in speaking with my dad at 1 a.m., that's our designated family time, because he's a night owl like me, informed me that there was a tornado in Trinidad and Tobago a few days ago. And to my knowledge, I don't know that I've ever heard of tornadoes touching down in Trinidad before. So food for thought as we embark on this evening's reflections of hurricane stories from the eye of the storm. We're going to first begin with a series of reading by Kai Miller, Travis Weeks, and N.J. Hamilton of hurricane stories. As you all know, how many people here have either experienced a hurricane or have their families affected by hurricanes in the last, right? Pretty much 95% of the audience, right? So we thought it was worth reflecting on as one aspect of the Bruggadung, as we know, is as much about the environment, social, political, cultural, and obviously, if you're in the Caribbean, weather related. So we wanted to kind of acknowledge the centrality of this reality from here in Florida with Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Are Watching God, to more recent renditions or reflections, remembrances of hurricanes from across the region. And with that, I am going to invite Kai Miller, N.J. Hamilton, and Travis Weeks to take the stage.
Rain a fall, breeze a blow, kitchen backside outer door, water come in a me room, me sweep out some with the broom. The little dog laughed to see such fun, and the dish ran away with the spoon.
You see, in terms of what we write, or perceptual models, we are more conscious in terms of sensibility of the falling of snow, for instance, than of the force of the hurricanes, which take place every year. In other words, we haven't got the syllables, the syllabic intelligence to describe the hurricane, which is our own experience, whereas we can describe the imported alien experience of the snowfall. It is that kind of situation that we are in. You see, what is even more important as we develop this business of emergent language in the Caribbean is the actual rhythm and the syllables, the very software, in a way, of the language. What English has given us as a model for poetry, and to a lesser extent prose, but poetry is the basic tool here, is the pentameter. And it carries with it a certain kind of experience, which is not the experience of the hurricane, but the hurricane. The hurricane does not roar in pentameters. And that's the problem. How do you get a rhythm that approximates the natural experience, the environmental experience? From History of the Voice, Kamau Brathwaite.
Ekwi.
Quack.
Ekwi, Mamaila.
Quack.
Time and time again, grandmother plucked bits of fall coop from the penguin fence. Grandfather drained his fields, shot up their lives against improvidence. When the earth baked hard again into the forest and he walked to cut the thatch to patch his house, corn drying in the dusk, he hung from the rafters while afu yam and sweet potato ripened, safe from breeze blew on the ground. Hey, Kui Mamaila.
Quack.
Hey, Kui.
Quack.
Way. When the wind rose in Ofri, he opened his tin trunk, took his good clothes out and packed the corn in. Granny topped it with cassava bammies and chocolate balls with a nutmeg and cinnamon leaf tied with string. After the storm, Granny would extract milk from fallen coconuts, make coconut oil to fry the bammies, grate corn to make porridge, melt the chocolate in hot milk with cinnamon and nutmeg to give it courage. Hey, Kui!
Quack.
Hey, Kui, Mamaila!
Quack.
Yeah. In those days, storm warning came by telegraph to postmistress. Living in the bush, grandfather couldn't see her, rushed to broadcast the news by posting a black flag. But he was the seventh son of a seventh son and could read signs and interpret wonders. So when the swallows flew below the roofline, when the sky took on a special peach glow, when flocks of birds sailed west over the hill, when clouds banked at the far side and the air was still, he knew it was time to batten down. Into the house, Granny brought her goat and fowls, though in the excitement, 2 birds fled. Hey, Kui!
Quack.
Hey, Kui, Mamaila!
Quack.
Grandfather knew just when to board the last window up and brace the door. Noah's Ark was never as crowded and wet. Thatch blew about and whipped our faces. Water seeped in. But on grandfather's bed, we rode above it, everything holding together. For my grandfather had learned from his father and his father before him all the ways of orchestrating disaster. And my grandmother's cool on Sankeys led us into singing. In our frail bark in total darkness, we passed through the eye and out the other side, till all was still. When grandfather opened the window, the sun was shining. Hey, Kui!
Quack.
Hey, Kui, Mamaila! Granny hitched up her skirt and petticoats to unseemly heights. We children had never seen so much skin. Stood waist deep in the water in her yard and searched the blue skies for a sign as Noah's wife did. She found it when her missing sensi fowl and favorite leghorn rooster turned up safe but ruffled, having spent the night together in the hole in the cotton tree. And as we put our lives back together, I, too young to be schooled yet on disaster, spent my time watching the sensi fowl, that strutting leghorn rooster, dying to be the first to see the strange bird fated to be born out of that great storm. Hurricane Story, 1903, Olive Sr.
It took a hurricane to bring her closer to the landscape. Half the night she lay awake, the howling ship of the wind, its gathering rage, like some dark ancestral specter, fearful and reassuring. Talk to me, Huracan, talk to me, Oa, talk to me, Shango. And Hattie, my sweeping back home cousin. Tell me why you visit an English coast. What is the meaning of old tongues reaping havoc in new places? The blinding illumination, even as you short-circuit us into further darkness. What is the meaning of trees falling heavy as whales, their crusted roots, their cratered graves? Oh, why is my heart unchained?
Why?
Tropical oil of the weather, I am aligning myself to you. I'm following the movement of your winds. I'm riding the mystery of your storm. Ah, sweet mystery. Come to break the frozen lake in me, shaking the foundations of the very trees in me, that the earth is the earth is the earth. Hurricane hits England, Grace Nichols.
Once branching light startles the hair of the coconuts, and on the villa's asphalt roofs, rain resonates like pebbles in a pan, and only the skirts of surf walls round the abandoned bandstand. And we hear the telephone cables hillowing like fingers tapped over an Indian's mouth. Once the zinc roofs began wrenching their nails like freight uncrated with a crowbar, we remember you as the possible deity of the whistling marsh canes. We doubt that you were ever slain by the steel Castilian lances of 1,000 horizons, deity of the yellow-skinned ones who thatched your temple with plantains.
When the power station's blackout grows frightening as amnesia, and the luxury resorts return to the spare tips of candles, and the swimming pools in their marsh lights multiply with hysterical lilies, like the beaks of fledglings uttering your name. When lightning fizzles out in the wireless, we can see and hear the streaming black locks of clouds flesh the gamboge of lightning, and the epicanthic almond-shaped eye and of the whirling cyclops running through the cloud smoke, or ocean's marathon strider, the only survivor of their massacred deities.
Whose temples change like the clouds over Yucatan? In the copper twilight over Ecuador? Runner who can grip the Mars tails of galloping cirrus? Vault in the dead conquistadors of the helmeted palms? You'd never reply to the name of the northern messenger, whose zigzagging trident pitchforks the oaks like straw. Not to the thunderous tambours of Shango. You rage till we get your name right, till the surf and the bent palms dance to your tune. Even if, at your entrance, clouds plod your horizon like caparisoned camels, and the wind begins to unwhirl like a burnous. You abhor all other parallels but our own hurricane. You scream like a man whose wife is dead. Hurricane, like a god who has lost his race. You yank the electric wires with wet hands.
And then we think of a different name than the cute ones christened by radar, in the sludge that sways next day by the greased pierheads, where a rowboat still rocks in fear, and Florida now flares to your flashbulb, and the map of Texas rattles. And we lie in the dark, and we lie awake in the dark, by the dripping stelae of candles, or heads gigantified on the walls, and think of you, still running with tendons feathered with lightning water warrior, whom the chained trees strain to follow, havoc, reminder, ancestor, and when morning enters, pale as an insurance broker, God.
The sea's almond's dress is drenched in the morning. The leaves drip on the clotheslines like wax drops from candles. The pent waves circle their fences like witless sheep. A freighter is parked on the coastal road to the airport, and the birds won't be back for some time. The chairs around the bandstand are heaped up like the morning after your dance, and the worms we have buried on the ground spark and stutter again. Roofs are scattered all over the hillsides like cards dropped during a shootout, and the sea starts the pompous thunder of a military funeral as spray shoots up round the kiosk where the police band played. We return the pieces of fear to their proper place. The shelf at the back of the mine, the artifacts, the Carib arrowheads, the pin-pierced amulets with that force whose weather veins are the pen specks of frigate birds. Your name fades again in the grounded flights, where in dark hangars with the mineral patience of cattle, a cold sweat slides down the silver hides of the empty plains. Hurricane with Derek Walcott.
Margaret and Armand Delbert. Such a fine young couple, everybody said.
True.
So full of ambition, so striving. Their little boy, so bright, so handsome, so thriving. Though, in 1951, after the hurricane struck, they ended up sucking salt just like everybody else. Margaret said, look, we'll never get anything back together unless we do something serious, something really ambitious. Plenty people going to England now, plenty women going in for nursing. Let me go while you continue here with the farming, just for the time being. As soon as I graduate, I'll come back, get big job. That time, see me in my white snow, soon turn matron. Together, we can build a good life for our son. But somehow, she never got far with the nursing, for in her life, she never knew people could call so, never knew a country could call so. With her heart turning into stone with nothing to show for it, she wanted so much for the boy. She decided, though, she could continue striving. She wouldn't write again until she could send him what amounted to something. The man, begging his mother to keep the boy, said,
Source of farming can't take us too far. This can never provide my son with the life I want for him.
He set off for America to be a farm worker. Every year, he went to pick oranges. Those on the tree in his yard turned black from blight, for he never came back to that piece of ground. He settled in the city, got married. Sometimes, when prodded, he sent something for the boy. He had other things on his mind now. He was ambitious and striving again, going far. Granny said to the boy, hard years children can't reach nowhere. You will never amount to anything. His ears weren't hard. He was just hard of hearing. After a while, he also stopped speaking. His granny wrote to his father, whom he couldn't remember, to come and get him, saying, I can't strive with him anymore. His father, saying he would try with him, came and took him home and introduced him.
This is your sister Ruben. This is your brother Rose. This is your sister Caroline. This is your brother Jonathan. And this is your new mother, Miss Sharon.
A lady who looked as if she had learned to smile out of a book. After a while, they said it was too hard years to amount to anything and left him alone. He'd go by the shore and practice writing without a pen. First, he blew breath across the water. Ah. After that, every day he'd go and call out, ah, oh, ow, ow, ah. He threw the sounds across the ocean like stones, hoping they'd hit something, rebound off someone he couldn't give a name to, but only by an echo returning would he know the ocean wasn't as empty as he was. Every day, no. Ah, oh, ah, oh, ah. Till one day he managed. Ow, ow, ma. Soon the sounds would make syllables. The syllables would make words. The words would make phrases. The phrases would make poems. His mother would never read them. She was too busy swabbing out a hospital in Reading, England. After so many years, she no longer even thought of him, or anything else for that matter, gazing day after day into that pail of water, until one day, as she sluiced out a ward, she fancied she heard someone calling her name. Ma. It sounded as if it had come from the pail. It sounded like her rightful name, not the name Miss Black, to which she, by which she was known here. No one here knew that name. Ow, ow, ma. Each day she poured more and more water on the floor to try to capture that sound. Miss Black, matron said. Finally, this just won't do. No, she said, turning the taps on full, flooding the ward, pouring out the ocean from her pail. Standing by the shore, she clearly heard her name now. Ma. I must go, she said, taking off her shoes. I must go. No, taking off her overalls. I must go to my, stripping off her clothes, son in Inantown, Jamaica, stepping into the water as they rushed to restrain her. My son, standing on the far shore, he heard at last rebound the sound he'd sent, though slightly bent by distance, and without conscious intent, he started walking to meet it. Hurricane Story, 1951, Olive Sr.
Most of the great flamethrowers were there, and naturally, handling Big John the Conqueror and his works. How he had done everything big on earth, then went up to heaven without dying at all. Went up there picking a guitar and got all the angels doing the ring shout round and round the throne. Then everybody but God and old Peter flew off on a flying race to Jericho and back, and John the Conqueror won the race. Hekwi went on down to hell, beat the old devil, and passed out ice water to everybody down there. Somebody tried to see that it was a mouth organ harp that John was playing.
Foolishness.
But the rest of them would not hear that. Don't care how good anybody could play a harp. God would rather to hear a guitar. That brought them back to tea cake. How come he couldn't hit that box a lick or two? Well, all right now, make us know it.
Dish take off like flying saucer. The roof migrate without a visa. We say, water come in at the room. We sweep out some with the broom. A little dog laugh to see such fun. And the dish run away with the spoon. Everybody say, water.
Then McBoy went crazy to the feet and danced himself, and everybody else crazy. When he finished, he sat back down on the floor and went to sleep again. Then they got off to playing Florida Flip and Coon Can. Then it was dice. Not for money. This was a show-off game. Everybody posing his fancy shots. As always, it boiled down to tea cake and motorboat. Tea cake with his shy green and motorboat with his face like a little black cherubim just from a church tower doing an amazing thing with anybody's dice. The others forgot the work and the weather watching them through. It was art. $1,000 or so in Madison Square Garden wouldn't have gotten any more breathless suspense. It would have just been more people holding in.
Rain a fall, breeze a blow, water come in, breeze a blow, water come in, rain, breeze.
After a while, somebody looked out and said,
It ain't getting no better out there. Believe I'll get on over to my shack now.
Motorboat and T-Cake were still playing, so everybody left them at it. Sometime that night, the winds came back. Everything in the world had a strong rattle, sharp and short like Stu Beef vibrating the drum head near the edge of his fingers. By morning, Gabriel was playing the deep tones in the center of the drum. So when Jeannie looked out of her door, she saw the drifting mist gathered in the west, that cloud field of the sky, to arm themselves with thunders and march forth against the world. Louder and higher and louder and wider, the sound and motion spread, mounting, sinking, darking. It woke up old Okeechobee, and the monster began to roll in his bed, began to roll and complain like a peevish whirl on a grumble. The folks in the quarters and the people in the big houses further around the shore heard the big lake and wondered. The people felt uncomfortable, but safe because there were the sea wells, the sea walls, to chain the senseless monster in his bed. The folks let the people do the thinking. If the castles thought themselves secure, the cabins didn't worry. Their decision was already made as always. Chink up your cracks, shiver in your wet beds, and wait on the mercy of the Lord. The bossman might have the thing stopped before morning anyway. It is so easy to be hopeful in the daytime when you can see the things you wish on. But it was night. It stayed night. Night was striding across nothingness with the whole world, the whole world in his hands. A big burst of thunder and lightning that trampled over the roof of the house. So T-Cake and Motorboat stopped playing. Moto looked up in his angel-looking way and said,
Big Master drum chair upstairs.
Janie said,
I'm glad y'all stopped that crap shooting, even if it wasn't for money. Boy, Massa is doing his work now. Us ought to keep quiet.
They huddled closer and stared at the door. They just didn't use another part of their bodies, but they didn't look at anything but the door. The time was past for asking the white folks what to look for through that door. 6 eyes were questioning God. Through the screaming wind, they heard things crashing and things hurtling and dashing with unbelievable velocity. A baby rabbit, terror-ridden, squirmed through a hole in the floor and squatted off there in the shadows against the wall, seeming to know that nobody wanted its flesh at such a time. And the lake got madder and madder, with only its dikes between them and him. In a little wind lull, T-Cake touched Janie and said,
I reckon you wish now you had stayed in your big house far away from such as this, don't you?
Nah.
No?
Yeah, nah. People don't die till their time come nohow. Don't care where you at. I'm with my husband in a storm, that's all.
Thank you, ma'am. But supposing you was to die now, you wouldn't get mad at me for dragging you here?
Nah. We've been together around 2 years. If you can see the light at daybreak, you don't care if you die at dusk. It's so many people never seen the light at all. I was fumbling around and God opened the door.
He dropped to the floor and put his head in her lap.
Well, then, Janie, you meant what you didn't say, 'cause I never knowed you were so satisfied with me like that. I kind of thought.
The wind came back with triple fury and put out the light for the last time. They sat in company with the others in other shanties, their eyes straining against crude walls, and their souls asking if he meant to measure their puny might against his. They seemed to be staring at the dark, but their eyes were watching God. From their eyes were watching God, Zora Neale Hurston.
My mother wasn't christened Imelda, but she stashed a cache of shoes beneath the bed. She used to travel to Haiti, Panama, Curacao, Miami, wherever there was bargain to catch, even shoes that didn't have match. Back home, she could always find customer come bend down to look and talk where she planted herself on sidewalk. But when the hurricane hit, she banned her belly and ball for 5 flights a day to Miami, grounded. No sale on her shoes getting junju from the damp since the roof decamp, and the rest sitting in customs impounded. My mother banked between her breasts, lived out her dreams in a spliff or 2 each night. Since the storm, things so tight her breasts shrivel, the notes shrinking. Every night she there thinking, every morning she get up and she wail, Lord, life so soak up and no bailout to rotted.
Rotted.
Hurricane Story 1988, Olive Sr.
Wah, wah, wild Gilbert. Wah, wah, wild Irma. Wah, wah, wild Maria. I lived through 2 hurricanes as a child, and I remember all the good stuff that eventually came in the mail. M&Ms, bug spray, playing cards. So when I heard that Hurricane Irma had made landfall on American soil last Wednesday, I began gathering those kinds of things to mail to my friends and family. I put the packages together and watched the news. But there was nothing in what I saw about the hurricane hitting the United States. When I finally received a text from my Aunt Cecile on Thursday, she wrote, "The post office is gone." "What do you mean gone?" I texted back. She responded with a list. Grocery stores, gone. Schools, gone. Hospital, gone. "What do you mean gone?" I asked again. "Gone," she texted again. "Demolished. No roof, no walls."
Wow. Yeah. In the Bahamas, when we have to deal with difficulties, we try to make the saddest people among us laugh, knowing that they'll return the favor in our hour of need. So when Hurricane Dorian hit land in the Abaco Islands in the northern Bahamas a few days ago, and the horrific pictures started streaming in on social media, among the videos shared early on was what appeared to be a woman running through the rain and wind to safety, only to have her hair wig blow from her head. The punchline wasn't the wig taking flight. It was that she doubled back to retrieve it. Rather than continue to safety, expanding the list of life's essentials. Right. Many people might read this as a highly inappropriate moment for such frivolity. But for Bahamians, it was perfect timing.
Fun and joke aside, the stories of rescue and relief in the Bahamas since Hurricane Dorian have left me and so many in heartbreak and reflecting on what it means to survive. From the man who rode out the entire storm hunkered in the mangroves of Abaco, to the people who held onto trees during the storm surge, to the sick baby found in the mud with a father who didn't leave for fear of being deported, the injured survivors, Bahamians and Haitians, at the Princess Margaret Hospital in New Providence, telling doctors that they don't want treatment, they don't want to live because they have lost everyone. Sole survivors of families drowned or swept away in the storm, the explicit xenophobia and framing of our people as very, very bad drug dealers and gang members, Haitian children being deported by the Bahamian government. These stories are hard to hold or imagine, and yet we must.
We must.
Must. Maybe you've heard of the Virgin Islands, of St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. It's a good place to go on vacation, to fall in love, to have a wedding. But 100 years ago, the islands were called the Danish West Indies. Denmark sold the islands in 1917 to the United States for $25 million. The people who lived there, including my ancestors, were no longer Danish West Indians. As my cousin Norma remembers, learning from older relatives, on the day of the transfer, the Danish flag went down slowly on the flagpole. The American flag went zoom, zoom, up. And then we were as American as Coca-Cola.
Coke, is it?
It took 10 more years for Virgin Islanders to actually be granted American citizenship. Before the transfer, the Danes and the Americans argued about trading us, with one Danish lawmaker said to have risen from his deathbed to vote against the sale. Either way, the conversation about our future hadn't included us.
We Bahamians listen to climate deniers in rich countries who are oblivious or indifferent to those who bear the weight for their wonderful lives. Meanwhile, the water rises from the ground in our yards because the water table is so high during high tide, and plants we once depended upon no longer grow. We experience too much rain or too little rain, and freshwater supplies are increasingly contaminated by rising sea levels. But the climate deniers don't see. We watch as the governments of small island states like our own, tied to multinational agreements, are forced to make decisions that are not in the best interests of the people they serve. While our electrical grid fails and we are made more dependent on fossil fuels rather than renewable energy. Too expensive, they say. For whom? We reply.
Oh.
Is cost the only consideration?
Perhaps it is being in the midst of relief and recovery from Hurricane Dorian just a few weeks ago, or still in recovery from Hurricane Maria just 2 years ago, or from Hurricane Matthew 3 years ago, or from the earthquake in Haiti a decade ago, and on and on and on. But perhaps the disasters we don't talk about enough or even at all are the most dangerous. The disaster of tourism development, over-reliance and dependence on foreign investment, continued exploitation of migrant labor, and the failures of our post-neo-colonial states. Maybe we are too afraid to speak or act. Maybe we haven't done enough to educate the public about climate change or social and environmental justice as one connected struggle. Maybe we spend too much time blaming individual consumers instead of placing more blame and accountability on private sector, industries, and governments. Maybe the environmental movement in the Caribbean has failed with its middle and upper class politics. Maybe other movements have failed to show the connection between social inequalities and climate change. Maybe it's easier to blame immigrants, gays, and all those scary others for our social problems. Maybe we have no plan B.
It is difficult to summon humor now. We are an archipelago of 700 islands linked to a global archipelago of small communities of Bahamians across the world. I now live in what is often referred to as the Northern Caribbean city of Miami. The storm assaulted two of the larger, more populated islands in the north of the country, just 100 miles away. I can feel the occasional bands of rain and breeze while I hear reports of 200, 185, 165 mile per hour winds. I think, what will be left? This is no longer unusual for Caribbean people. As I shared video footage with friends in Puerto Rico, they remarked, I know the sound of that wind.
Sound of that wind.
Is this what it means to be intimately connected by horror? Is there a new creolized language and aesthetic we have now become fluent in by default? We are island people. Where do you go? We live on slim margins.
That Sunday, the news media made a big deal out of Irma's landfall on the Florida Keys as a Category 4 hurricane, and then on Florida itself. But in truth, Irma had struck United States land days before as a disastrous Category 5 hurricane. That was when it hit the United States Virgin Islands, devastating my home island, St. Thomas. That was when my aunt texted, gone. As we have over the last 100 years, we ask again with this storm, what kind of Americans are we? Do the real Americans know about this? Are you real Americans okay with this? It doesn't seem particularly American to me. Before Hurricane Irma hit the continental United States, it had already affected at least 100,000 Americans. Not tourists visiting the islands, just 100,000 Americans living in America's paradise. The United States Virgin Islands.
But no one in paradise is supposed to talk about the ugly truths of exploitation, environmental destruction for development, competition over scarce resources, the limited supply of fresh water, or the diversion of resources, water and electricity to hotels and foreign-owned wealthy homes. We need these harsh truths and untold stories to be spoken, analyzed, and understood.
We are in this together.
Our survival depends on it.
Or region, or people, or vulnerable islands of complex, unique, and shared histories.
We need honest reflections.
Sustainable solutions.
Tangible empathy and reasonings.
Regional actions and uprisings.
And revolutionary, decolonial justice vision in our Caribbean.
To survive.
From Angelique Nixon's op-ed, What Does It Mean to Survive After Dorian?
From Tiffany Yanique's op-ed, America's Battered Paradise.
From Erika James's Moya's op-ed, Hurricane Dorian Makes Bahamians the latest climate crisis victims.
Everybody now. Water come in a me room. Sweep out some with the broom. The little dog laugh to see such fun, and the dish run away with the spoon. Una see me dish, una see me fire.
Thank you very much. Just rest it under. Thank you very much, Travis, Kai, and NJ. And with that, I would like to invite to the front Tiffany Yanique, Angelique Nixon, and Erica Moya James. I'm going to do some brief introductions of each of the speakers this evening. I shouldn't say speakers, my conversants. Again, a round of applause for the readers. Angelique Nixon is a Black queer writer, artist, scholar, and activist, born and raised in Bahamas. She has been living and working in Trinidad and Tobago for over a decade. She's a social justice educator and community worker with over 20 years of experience and leadership in community justice, in community-based organization and academic institution. Her research and creative works are available widely. She's currently a senior lecturer at the researcher at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. She earned her PhD from the University of Florida in 2008, where she specialized in post-colonial and gender studies. I'm sorry, I've lost my. The University of the West Indies Center in she joined the UE IGDS in 2014 as a Fulbright scholar, and in 2015 as a lecturer, where she's now tenured and senior faculty member. Angelique, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Erica Moya James is an art historian, curator, and associate professor at the University of Miami. Her scholarship centers on indigenous, modern, and contemporary art of the Caribbean Americas and the African diaspora. A short selection of her publications include Charles White's JQs and The Limits of Universal Blackness. Erica is also a well-known curator, and some of the shows she has curated include, I'm going to try not to butcher the Kreyòl. In 2022, she curated Didier Williams's Nokut Sadeye for the Museum of Contemporary Art. I butchered it. I know I butchered it. In North Miami, and Nari Ward's Home of the Brave for the Vizlek Foundation in New York. Dr. James is the recipient of grants from the Warhol Foundation, Creative Time, the Mellon Foundation, the Terra Foundation, and is a research associate at the Visual Identities in Art, Design, and Research Center at the University of Johannesburg. Her step back on that. I was about to say her forthcoming book, but make no, the book is here. Her very recently published book. After Caliban, Caribbean Art in the Global Imaginary, which there are a few copies available here to be signed by the author this evening, was recently published about 3 weeks ago by Rutgers University Press. Thank you very much. Duke University Press. I have Rutgers on the brain. Duke University Press. Thank you very much, Erica, for joining us this evening. I have Rutgers on the brain. And lastly, but in no ways least, Tiffany Yannick is the author, most recently, of the novel Monster in the Middle, which was on numerous Best of the Year lists. Monster in the Middle was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Awards, the Townsend Prize, and was selected as a Library of Congress Great Read for 2023. Yannick is also the author of poetry collections of the poetry collection Wife, which won the Bocas Prize in Caribbean Poetry, and the United Kingdom's Forward Felix Denix Prize for the first collection. The novel Land of Love and Drowning, which won the Flaherty Dunnan First Novel Award from the Center for Fiction, the Phyllis Wheatley Award for the Pan-African Literature, and the American Academy of Arts and Letters Rosenthal Foundation Award. Land of Love and Drowning was also the finalist for the Orion Award in Environmental Literature and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award. She's also the author of a collection of stories, How to Escape from a Leper Colony, which won her a listing as one of the National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 and the Bocas Prize in Fiction. Professor Yannick is a member of the Virgin Islands Studies Collective, a group of activists and academics and artists who do decolonial work in and about archives. Thank you very much, Tiffany, for joining us this evening. I think that the bridge that's opened from the readings this evening, I thought in inviting these three scholars, academics, creative writers, to join this conversation because each of their op-eds encouraged us, forced us to think about the role of academics and the need for more front-facing public media dialogue in and about the effect of climate change on Caribbean island nation states. And I thought I wanted to open this evening by just asking each of the writers to reflect a little bit, tell us a little bit about how they came to write this op-ed. Because each one of these pieces, I think in many ways, gained a tremendous amount of traction, more than most academic pieces about climate change and global change in the Caribbean. And I think we are at a historical moment in the academy where we have to continue to find ways to speak about what we do to a much larger audience. And I think that the op-ed has long been a vehicle for that, but I thought that their works really gave us an occasion to reflect on that. So Erica, Tiffany, Angelique, if you can say a little bit about how you came to decide to write these op-eds for each of you. It's on, I think it should be on.
Good evening, everyone. This is yours, actually. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I first wanted to start off by thanking PAMM, Ms. Vickers in particular for hosting us, and to Kai and Pat for having us. And also thank Erica and Angelique for your amazing op-eds and for being on the stage with me. But I just want to say that I am so incredibly moved and overwhelmed by the experience that we all just had. That was, I don't even have words for what the three of you, Kai, Travis, and NJ, just took us through, what you allowed your bodies to do for all of us. It was just astounding, beautiful, and thank you so much for that. And it was, I think we just had really an incredible experience. And thank you for honoring the three of us by including us alongside those voices, those incredible ancestors living and moved on who have guided the way for all of us. What an honor to be in the same realm with them. That was just incredible. So I'm Tiffany Yannick. The article that I wrote is called Americans in a Battered Paradise. I wrote it on September 12th, just days after Irma hit the Virgin Islands, which is where I'm from. And it's true, my aunt texted me, and she used her last batteries to text the whole family, really, not just me, on a group chat to let us know that she was alive and what was going on. I felt obligated to write my article really primarily to get attention to the Virgin Islands so that we could get some resources sent our way. So I was using my, my platform as a writer, as a professor, full professor at a fancy institution, to try and get resources sent the way of the Virgin Islands. So that article was published in the New York Times, really as a way to say, hey, we need some attention back here. Because Irma hit the US, supposedly, days after it hit the US, when it hit the Virgin Islands. But as we all know, because we're very aware of how colonialism works, the Virgin Islands is American when it benefits the empire, and is other when it does not benefit the empire. And just days after I actually wrote that article, Maria hit the Virgin Islands. And I had no contact with my aunt after that for many weeks. So I wrote the article to bring attention. You know, I have to be honest, I wasn't thinking that Caribbean people were my audience. I was sort of desperately trying to get attention to the Virgin Islands. I think it worked to some extent, but once Maria hit, the focus shifted once again. And in the case of the Virgin Islands, the focus shifted really a lot, not only to Florida, but as far as that Caribbean lens, it shifted to Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico needed a lot of attention, but I also think that the Virgin Islands has a very small place in the US imagination. And frankly, I think sometimes even in the region's imagination. And so it became very easy to forget about us. And I think even in the conversations about Irma and Maria post, often the Virgin Islands has been forgotten. So I really am thankful to Kai also for allowing me to bring that back into our imagination, to bring the Virgin Islands back into the imagination for also all of us in the region. So thank you.
Let me see. How is my voice doing? Okay. Okay. This is the deep, sexy voice. I'm about to lose it. As Dorian was assaulting the Bahamas back in 2019, I just received a call out of the blue from Jen Packer from the New York Times asking if I would write something on this. And I was like, are you serious? You know, I hadn't done much public-facing work in this way. I think my curatorial work is very public-facing, and I believe in that, and I believe in having the Academy connect more with publics in my work. But this was a new opportunity for me, and she didn't give me any major directives except the word count. And she just left me to, in a sense, think through my response to what was happening in Dorian. And this was happening during the Green New Deal. I don't know if we even remember that, but AOC and Senator Markey had put forward something called the Green New Deal in the United States. And this was happening. You know, we were having this hurricane at the same time. This movement was, in a sense, gaining some momentum for living more responsibility in relation to climate change, et cetera. But for me, when I was asked, I really was in a state of shock. Dorian was a very visual hurricane for me. It was a hurricane that was on social media in a way that no other hurricane that I had ever experienced, and I'd lived through many, I'd never experienced it in such a visual way and a visceral way. I thought about the fact that of being inside and being battened down, as we say in the Bahamas, for hurricanes. But this time I was outside of it, but I was looking in on it in a way I'd never experienced. And as Angelique will probably say as well, we had a very personal relationship to it. My cousins, my niece, my cousin's daughter in Abaco, my friends in Grand Bahama. I was really very afraid. And we were texting, and there was a moment where the batteries died, the cell service ended, and all you had was darkness away from all of those images that kept coming, water rising, et cetera. And so I was writing in that place. And I think while I was writing, I had heard, I mentioned in the op-ed, hearing from a friend of mine at 3:45 a.m., because of course no one was sleeping. We were just getting this back. And that was the last I'd heard from her for like 3 days. And so I wrote the op-ed in that space of not hearing from her. And so for me, I think it was very personal. And my audience, in terms of audience, I think I was speaking to Bahamians first. I knew they would understand the joke, I knew that they would appreciate that in the worst moment because that's how we are, But I also wanted to make sure that a voice of someone from such a small place, from behind God's back, as we say, could have that platform, but also, in a sense, share a voice from that point of departure. It wasn't an opportunity where someone else was having that conversation. It was me having to speak on behalf of the people that I represent and who I am, So that's how it started. Jennifer didn't, they played with the title a little bit, but they literally left it for me. And it takes me a while to write sometimes, but that just came out, it just flowed. It was done within 24 hours. and I sent it off, and and then I heard from my friend.
Thank you so much, Pat, for this, and thank you so much. That was so beautiful and unexpected. I didn't know that was going to happen. It was really emotional to hear our words and to be in the company of the amazing hurricane stories. So for me, I write publicly of as much as I can, along with all the other things. It's a part of my activism and work, and I think it's important. It's been important for me from grad school to now to figure out how do we continue to show up in spaces and be able to translate and interpret all that I'm learning, and it's been a part of my own politics. And so I've been writing for different newspapers, and in particular Starbrook News, which is a Guyana newspaper, and Alyssa Trotz, who has the In the Diaspora column. I hope everybody knows about it. And when I had written with Alyssa before about Haitian migration issues in the past, and among other things. And so when after Dorian happened, I think I was already full speed in collecting relief items. So I was in the midst of trying to rally in Trinidad, and folks, were asking me, because they're like, "Oh, you're the Bahamian that we know. What can we do?" And so I was in the midst of, major organizing around that. But then Alyssa messaged and said, "We need something. Can you write it now for tomorrow?" How newspaper writing is. I ended up writing 3 pieces, though. I wrote When the Apocalypse Is Now, and How Are We to Survive? And then I wrote a piece called Missing and Uncounted about Haitian Bahamians who we will never know how many passed away, and we still don't know. And so it was a 3-part situation over a few months. And so I just want to say that for me, I was grieving home in the aftermath of Dorian. I live and work in Trinidad, equally vulnerable to climate crisis and the unsustainable development we're all living in. And so I watched Dorian being outside, but inside, and all I could do was write from a place of deep sorrow and despair. All I could do was share my grief through words and activism. And months passed and nothing was ever the same, and I don't think the Bahamas is the same. It has not recovered. I was just in Freeport. I don't know if you've been lately. My aunt passed away, and I went to Freeport in July, and you drive around parts of Grand Bahama, and it literally looks the same. It's 5 years later. And I had some images of 5 years later, but we'll see if we have time. But just to say that I, offered these words as a call and response, because I feel like we need that more than ever, and to make visible the connections between climate crisis, unsustainable development, and these disasters in our region. And I shared it with love and solidarity, thinking about how do we call for change. I also was up at night waiting to hear my elder aunt and uncle and a family friend who's disabled. They survived the hurricane and flooding in a 1-story concrete house inland in Freeport. And they watched as the floodwaters rose up in their home and then waist deep, and they sat in those waters for hours waiting to be rescued. And my cousin is on the phone, and so that drove me to figuring out, okay, what to do something. And then when I had to sit down and write, I ended up writing about them too, which was really hard. And I don't think my aunt ever recovered from that. And that's the other thing when we talk about recovery. My chosen sister also survived it, and she literally has so much trauma. The minute a storm happens over the last 5 years, she has to, Sonia's here. Hi, Sonia. There's a lot of that, and I think it's so hard to talk about it, and it's so hard to make the connections. And then for me, I feel like there was all of this disaster, but we also had to think about how do we talk about Haitians living in these spaces, and I feel because I've done it in different ways, I was able to do that, and that was my contribution. I wanted to make sure that we had that be a visible part of telling the story.
Thank you so much for that. as I'm listening to your responses, I'm thinking about, it sounds like for all of you, writing is also a mode of repair. And, you know, it's important to think, it's hard when it's around you in that way, Angelique, to your point. And if the folks can loop her videos, what, you know, when we're thinking about repair, you know, I remember going to Grenada after Ivan hit and flying over, and I thought, that's it, you know, Grenada will never recover from this, never. And then I went to Grenada 10 months later, and I was like the kid in the candy store, my face pressed to the window, because I could not believe the kind of regrowth that had started to happen, you know. But it's so the land has a way of repairing itself. But I'm curious to hear from each of you, you know, this is why, you know, the eye of the storm, that first person, how does your work help you with that work of repair? As Angelique said, being both inside and out, professionally and personally. And, you know, how, I think also, if we're frank with each other, within the academy, that front-facing work is not always recognized and valued in the same way. How do we think about repair as we, you know?
I just want to say, I guess, two things. One, as a follow-up on what Angelique said about the landscape, because that was something that really struck me when I was in Grand Bahama last year. And my friend Claudette Dean, the artist Claudette Dean, took me around, and she was one of the persons who was texting me back and forth, you know, during the hurricane. And she showed me literally where she and her husband had survived in the second floor of their house. She showed me, you know, she just walked me through it. And it was almost too horrific for me to even think of someone being in that space. She lived on a canal. And literally, the water she said they watched as the water rose up, 10 feet, 20 feet, you know, and suck out everything in their house. Just literally the force of that, the force of nature. This isn't something to play with, you know? This is serious business. And to be honest, even what I remember, and as I was reading your op-eds in preparation for tonight, especially yours, I just remember the anger I felt. And the anger, I have very close personal and professional relationships with Puerto Rico, and I had, you know, literally been on the phone with my friends in Puerto Rico during Maria, and gathering things, doing, you know, sending batteries, sending things. And I remember when the current president started throwing things at the folks. And at the end of the op-ed, I just wanted to reference that. And because I remembered that. I remembered that kind of treatment, that sort of laissez-faire.
And this is a photo of the mud, the shanty towns in Abaco, which again, we don't know how many people we'll never know, right? And I think those are the things that I've never been able to get over.
Yeah.
Right?
But how the government
and our government is terrible, and that's an understatement. But you know, just to say that, I think that's also a part of what we have to continue talking through. And the slides will come up, but what I wanted to show what's happening now, in Abaco in particular, that Haitian migrants are very much brought into spaces. I had added stuff about Beryl, because Beryl, of course, broke the records that Dorian did, and I thought it was important for us to think about that. But there are other shanty towns that have come up in Abaco, and they've just been, one is people have had to restart and figure out, because we know what's happening in Haiti. So folks who are living in Abaco are getting work from really the wealthy people who want to hire folks who will work for very little. And so it creates this really, really asymmetric, really disturbing, unequal relations of power. And why it is that people still end up going back to Abacove. They've rebuilt shanty towns, and one, I'm just showing here some stuff from Beryl, because I thought it was important for us to think about Beryl affecting Carriacou, St. Vincent, the Grenadines, all the way, Barbados and Jamaica. So another, intense, multiple countries being affected. I know Jamaica didn't get a lot of attention, but Jamaica got really, and so just sort of thinking about those connections. But the shanty towns that were rebuilt have been torn down by the government last year in 2024. And one is actually called Gaza. They changed the name from the mud to Gaza, and I thought that it was really important for us to think about that in this moment as well.
Could I speak also to the question of repair? I lived through Hugo and through Maryland. I was home in the Virgin Islands doing both those storms. And one of the ways that Virgin Islanders did reparative work for ourselves was through poetics. And I remember when I was in 6th grade doing Hugo, the big song on the radio was called Hugo, Make Me a Dan. Y'all, I don't know if we still use that word Dan in the region anymore, but back then, that was like, you're the big man, right? And so the idea was like, Hugo, make me a Dan, in part because people were looting. So you get to be a Dan because you could have, you could have go buy Bata shoes, but you don't have to buy them, you just go pick up your Bata shoes. And the song was funny, and it was all like, I get telephone, I get Bata shoes, I get new car, I get this, and Hugo, make me a Dan. So it was like humor, poetics, that kept us moving through. And in the wake of Irma Maria, one of the things that the poetic community did in the Virgin Islands that was also reparative was we used the radio, similar to how the Calypsonians used the radio in '96 for Hugo. We used the radio to spread this new poetic form that Virgin Islanders invented called a haiku, which was a kind of haiku poem, but with the syllabics of Irma and Maria. So it was like 5 hours that Irma was over, 7 days before the next one, and then I think 3 hours. So it's like that's the syllabics. You could find it online for the hurricane. And then people were sharing the haikus over the radio because you could call into the radio, and that was the way that you communicated with each other. And so this became a sort of community poetic project that we used to do reparative work. And I think it's not a mistake that the poets are the ones doing this work, whether they're doing it through the calypsos or through the haiku. But I do think literature has that kind of power. I can't say we will be all the way repaired, because I think the land will hold this destruction, and so will our bodies. But we can heal, and I think the poetry can help us.
Yeah, I want to build on that and say, so I didn't talk about repair.
Please. Yeah.
But repair, I think, for me, repair also means that we as a region need to confront a lot of our shit and, a lot of our stuff. And, I was thinking about Bruggadung and Brathwaite's amazing everything, but I started to think about the catastrophe of unnatural disasters, and just thinking about we could start from the earthquake in Haiti all the way to what we're dealing with now. And some of the images that were before this slide are of a tropical storm that hit Nassau just, a few weeks ago, and it caused ridiculous flooding. And it was only a storm, and everyone was like, tropical storms, we like sleep. We're like, we just go to sleep because it's just a tropical storm. We're used to those. But it was so intense, just as a tropical storm, that there was flooding in places that had never flooded before. Trinidad, where are my Trinidad people? It only needs to rain, what, for 20 minutes in Port of Spain, and we cannot get out. We're stuck there. You can't go anywhere. We've already had how many different flooding and extreme weather situations just in the last few months. So I'm thinking a lot about repair and that we need to, where's the action? We need to do something. And so this is some of my artwork that I wanted to just share, that I've been, since I've lived in Trinidad, the mangroves have been a place where I've been thinking a lot about my artwork, building from my book, Resisting Paradise, and my poetry, Saltwater Healing, and it's where my next work that I'm finishing, called Submerged Freedom, and I'm theorizing this place of being submerged from a perspective of climate, as well as migrant and sexual politics, that we are submerged, and theorizing from Brathwaite's The Unity is Submarine, and thinking about how do we think of submerged not only as very obviously literally, but also that we can create something new. And I think that might be where we can find repair and healing.
Thank you all for that. I want to just ask one more question, and then I'll open it up, or make a comment. Again, thank you, Kai, Travis, and NJ again, because it was interesting. I've read all of the op-eds, but to hear them given back to us in that voice, it brought it alive again for me in a different way. And I think we think about creative writers as the ones who give voice to these things. And I think that the critical voice is also a creative voice. And so I think in hearing you all just talk about from your first person space of what it meant to do that work, I think is so important now more than ever, right? And I think when we talk about this business of submersion right now in the United States, in the academy, what is going on in the Caribbean, I can't pretend that we're not being pushed and shoved beneath ground more and more, environmentally, socially, politically, economically, all of these other things. And so I'm wondering, and I think I want to open this up to a larger conversation about, what the theme of the conference is: what are writers today doing to meet this challenge? What do we feel our responsibility is, beyond the work of writing, right? Beyond the work. I mean, I have to, Erica is an avid gardener, somebody who catches rainwater, somebody who, every time I'm just like, yeah, on a kind of local level, I see the ways that she makes that just an integral part of her life and living. But what are the other ways that we, as academics, as poets, can think about what that work involves, and why it's important more now than ever to envision that work on the personal level, right? I think, writing is one of those modes, but what else can we think about I see it in your work, the way you work with natural materials. I see it in Erica's gardening. But I think, are those things connected for you? Is that where your head space is? Is that where your heart space is? When you're making work, when you're gardening. I think with the haiku, I didn't know about this. I think that, those are ways. It's not just the repair, but it's like, how can we activate our agency from where we are?
Oh, I think that climate issues should be a part of everything that we do. I don't think we have a choice. So whatever you're doing, if you're in the classroom, if you're writing, whatever you're teaching, climate should be a part of it. We need to talk about it. And so, for me, I run an LGBTQI organization, and so one of the things that we've been doing is we created something called Growing Spaces, building safe and sustainable communities for LGBTQI plus folks in Trinidad and Tobago. And a part of our work is we're doing food and nutrition security, and we're going to grow food together as a co-op. That's going to be, plus we're going to have like a bunch of different parts of it. It's really about wellness and shelter, but we added in this other part because that's also, and so I say it has to be a part of everything we do. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that one part of my article is that my youngest child is born on the same day that the Virgin Islands is transferred from Danish to U.S. rule, and you know. The natural disasters didn't start 10 years ago for us, right? The natural disaster really was when the Europeans came over across the water. That was our first natural disaster in the region. And for me, a lot of the work outside of putting pen to paper, which is a large part of my activist work, but a lot of my work outside that have to do with my motherhood. I have 3 children, and making sure that they understand the region as something that is for them, belongs to them, and they belong to it, even though they're being raised in Yankeelandia, because this is where I have a job, that they know that the region is for them and that they are for the region. But the other thing that I have been on a journey in, and I'm doing this in my writing, in my motherhood, and also whenever I can talk about it, is revisiting more of our indigeneity in the region. Because we kept this part of the world safe for a long time. You know, we were the stewards of that place before the first natural disaster in the region, the Europeans came over. And I think some of our Western Caribbean sistrens and brethrens have done some really vital groundwork in teaching us about the Taino importance. And I have been doing a lot of research to learn more about the Kalinago Carib influence, which has not been talked a lot about in our literature and has not been talked a lot about in our history books. We have sort of buried a lot of our Kalinago spirit and philosophies for historical reasons. You know, in part, many of us know this, that Carib and Kalinago peoples during the early parts of our colonialism it was legal to kill them on sight, right? So a lot of Kalinago people actually passed as Taino. And I knew even when I was growing up, my grandmother told me, you know, if they ask, you will say you are Taino, but you know we are really Caribs. Because of the fear of the backlash of being a Carib person. So for me, a lot of my work is like going back to those indigenous roots, learning more about my Carib ancestry, because we took care of the region for thousands of years. And if we can return to some of that knowledge, we can continue to care for the region.
It's hard to even follow you guys through this, but I guess all I have to say is that just growing up in the Bahamas, I was always a gardener. We always were people who grew things. My grandparents and grandfather, great-grandfather was a farmer. We had farmland, et cetera. So I always grew things. I always was able to pick fruit off of trees. And I think one of the things I have held on to in Miami is that aspect of the Caribbean. And I think I do it for my nephews, who are one generation removed from the Caribbean, but did not have, before they came to live down here with Aunt Erica, they didn't know about picking bananas off a tree. They didn't know about, they were almost distant from the earth. And for me, I think gardening and being able to grow things has always made me appreciate nature, the earth, as a caretaker, as something that feeds us, that sustains us, that gives me peace, something I can be in and just the whole world can wash away. And so when I think of everything in the Bahamas growing up, I was attendant of the fact that water no longer just came from the sky. It had already started rising from the ground. You know, I could tell the difference, how the climate was changing, how the impact of these things that were far away from me was impacting us, you know? And one of Angelique's op-ed, she talks about what we can't say, what we can't speak of. And she talks about tourism. But I think one of the things I would like for us to be free to talk about is the impact, the real impact of climate change on the Caribbean. You know, I try to grow things. I try to be in touch with that earth. But climate change is making us sick. You know, we can't talk about cancer. We can't talk about these sort of impacts, the things that I can't no longer grow in the Bahamas as a result of the water table rising and salt impacting the drinking water. I can't talk about the ways in which, you know, just things that were natural to me as a child I can no longer grasp, even as I try to do that through gardening here in Miami so that my nephews could understand and know. So there's a sort of, we're becoming estranged, I think, from ourselves and history and the land and landscape. And I think part of the work of our work, or the work that I do, is to hopefully let younger people get, I don't know, I was a barefoot child, a barefoot gal, as we used to say. And you know, now we say, tell our kids to put on shoes everywhere. But I think, I don't know, maybe they need to run and feel that grass a little bit, be more in touch with the earth. That may sound a little pie in the sky, but that's very Caribbean for me. And it made me honor the earth, understand what it gave me, and what I needed to do to protect it.
I'd like to open. Okay. So I'm going to open this up because the tech people need to move on. Please, are there any questions from people in the audience for our three panelists, writers, thinkers? Any questions or comments? Keep the conversation going. Okay. You look like you want to ask a question, and then we will continue the conversation.
Hello? Hello. Yeah, I was like, well, no, if no one's saying anything, I thought I would be quiet, but I won't be quiet. I want to say thank you for sharing today. I'm really overwhelmed because I haven't seen some of those images in a long time from Dorian. And Erica, when you said it was like a natural, quote unquote, natural disaster that happened on social media, that's so true, because I still remember like some of the videos like about the man who said, and then my wife was there and then the waters came and then she just died on me. Do you remember that guy? It was horrifying. But I'm thinking about the healing question and thinking about the role of like the writer and the artist in healing. I loved hearing about the haikus. Harakus. Oh man, super amazing. After Dorian, I just wanted to this is a comment, I'm sorry, it's not a question, but I just wanted to say after Dorian, the National Art Gallery did a series in the Bahamas, did a series of like workshops. They just did this whole series. It was called We Got You. And I still feel like maybe it wasn't very well received. Like maybe people thought it wasn't the job of the National Art Gallery to be doing this 180 on their art programming, but they brought in like folks who do art therapy, like Susan Moore McKay came in, who lived in Grand Bahama. I did like a zine workshop with some folks who were displaced, and I just thought it was really important for the National Art Gallery to realize that they could make this role. They did a whole exhibition based on that as well, that writers and artists were invited to respond to. So it was just like a very helpful healing response, I think, from the art community.
Oh, Refuge.
Refuge.
I was
You remember
in that.
Refuge? I was
Yeah.
trying to remember the name of the show, but I
Yeah, it was
can't
Refuge.
remember.
You were in that, and I was in it
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. It was powerful, and I'm glad that we didn't just pretend like it didn't happen. Because just because we were in Nassau, so we did get a pretty good swipe in Nassau as well. A lot of places flooded. We had some friends who were displaced out of Seabreeze in our house, and their house was flooded too. But still, I think sometimes like Nassau just pretends, you know, we don't have to worry about it if it's another island. But everyone really rallied. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to bring that up because I thought that was really important when the gallery responded in that way. Yeah.
So can we offer a vote of thanks to all of the... And please, we may be ending this session, but the museum is open until 9 p.m. I want to encourage people to continue the conversation out on the patio. I believe they're... I'm not sure if they're still serving drinks, but the galleries are definitely open. Okay. So please, thank you again, Erica, Tiffany, Angelique, Kai, Travis, and Jay. Thank you so much.